My name is Rashid Seedat. I'm currently the Executive Director of something called the Gauteng City Region Observatory. It's actually based here on campus. It's in fact a partnership between Wits University, the University of Johannesburg, Gauteng Province, and the Local Government Association. It basically studies Gauteng. I started here at Wits in 1981, and basically I did a BA degree. I graduated in 1985. Obviously, I finished in 84. Then I came back in 86. I did a high diploma in development planning, and I then have two masters, both in Wits, one in development planning and the other one in public management. And I spent most of my life, professional life, as a public servant in government in the city of Johannesburg and Gauteng Province. In the last 5 years, I'm sort of now in academia once again. I am really interested in struggle history, both professionally and personally, in the sense that I have been doing some writing on struggle history, and so I love the idea of an archive, reclaiming the archive, especially around student politics during the 1980s. I know that there was some limited work done in the past by Kola Mangu, and I think Salim Badat, who used to be a vice chancellor at Rhodes University, has written something on student politics in the 1980s, but certainly not enough about the history of the Black Student Society, a Zanian Students Organization, long before it became SANSCO and SASCO and so on. I think in the years when there was a major upsurge in the struggle against apartheid, and I think that Wits and the Black Student Society and so on played a not insignificant role in the struggle. It was the BSS was one of the founder members of the United Democratic Front in the 1980s, and a lot of the political rallies, because of the relative level of protection that we had in those days, I think we were able to innovate quite a lot. But also, I think there was a link. It wasn't only an ivory tower sort of idea. It was also in the idea that we reached out to communities. So, I was an activist on campus in the BSS, but I was also an activist in Lenasia, where I lived in civic organizations, in youth organizations, and in the United Democratic Front. I think that, the younger generations have no idea about, okay, maybe that's an exaggeration, but I think often, in my experience, have very limited ideas about what happened. I think the 1980s were really important because it was the defining decade before the end of apartheid, right? And why was it important? One, I think, very importantly, was non-racialism. I think that people don't really, today, don't understand that non-racialism was really important in practice amongst black people, broadly defined, Indian, colored, and African, but also amongst many white comrades, many of whom came from Wits, for example. Somebody like David Webster, who was a professor here. He was assassinated by the apartheid government, for example. And so, those sorts of things are really important for us, for the current and future generations to actually remember. And how do we do that? We do that by preserving memory through physical things like archives and documents and so on, but also through oral history, trying to remember and preserve that kind of memory, for the future. And then that can then get written up. Of course, there are many interpretations about what happened. That is a normal academic sort of idea, but I think that the only way you can actually have all of those different interpretations of the past is by ensuring that the archive is in place. Let me just say that we were quite involved. I was certainly quite involved in the BSS doing posters. and in the first instance. And I remember we were actually taught by people in the National Union of South African Students, NUSAS people, how to actually do this. I mean, I came from Lenasia. We didn't have all of those skills. So in those days, we had something called silk screening. I don't know, people don't use it anymore. But so that's how we made posters on a mass scale. And it's also something that we carried through to our communities. And the other thing that I was well known for on campus was basically painting the wall. So there was this wall which is maybe about, say, maybe 4 meters in width and maybe about, say, 2.5 meters in height. And basically the idea was that you could paint over it and paint slogans, or you can paint, you can advertise your events with right outside what's now called the Matrix. In those days, it used to be called the Students' Union. So I used to, I used to don overalls, go with a couple of paint buckets, and as I was painting, people would say, "Oh, can I join?" Of course you can, and we would put slogans and that kind of thing. So that's a very enduring memory. In fact, I remember, I always recall that one of the former presidents of the Black Student Society, Chris Nobo, who died of COVID during the COVID period, whenever because he then became a colleague of mine in the city of Johannesburg many, many years later, and whenever we bumped him, he'd say, "Oh, Rash," and that was my nickname, Rash, I always remember you painting the wall kind of thing, right? So some people remember it very clearly. So that was one of enduring memory that I have.